So we're at Coriole. Peter?
Yes.
How you going, mate?
Very good. Thanks for coming.
Duncan, how you going? So,
Excellent.
Where are we?
It was where we were brought up as kids. It didn't look anything like this. It was pretty awful. Thankfully, 2 years ago, it was renovated without a purpose in mind, but it was renovated, and then COVID hit, and we needed the space, and it's been excellent.
Would I be right in saying that Coriole is the birthplace of Fiano in Australia or South Australia?
In Australia?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, saying that, there were 2 vines that existed in a very obscure vine collection, thankfully, because it meant we could access them. But yes, we were responsible for bringing it to Australia.
Yeah.
If you go back into our cellars, you try wines from the 70s and the 80s, you try Chenin Blancs, Chardonnay, Riesling, Sauvignon Blanc, Semillon, you name it, we've planted them all.
Touriga Rosé back in the 80s.
Yep. And a lot of those varieties, I mean, Touriga's had a resurgence, but a lot of those white varieties I mentioned, you think, what were we thinking? So ill-suited to this region.
Yeah.
But it just shows how far education and the knowledge of wine has progressed in a short period of time. To find something like Fiano, which is beautifully suited to this region.
Yeah. When was it first?
So it was planted here in 2001, and
Yeah.
then the first vintage in 2005. So it's and at that stage, it was very much we actively encouraged as many people as we could to plant it. A lot of our neighbours have it planted. It's now one of the biggest white wine classes in the McLaren Vale wine show. And you know, you would know yourself. You go into restaurants, you go into wine shops in Australia now. You'll definitely find at least one Fiano on the shelf, and definitely one on each wine list. Whereas 20 years ago, most people had never heard of it.
Yeah.
And still, most people have never heard of it, but it shows the potential. Still to.
And do you guys actually think that it's going to go through a huge boom?
I think it has a lot more potential than some other varieties, for sure, sort of newer varieties. I think it's pretty diverse. It's pretty well suited to a lot of different regions throughout, well, South Australia and Australia, and does well for a range of styles, which is really quite interesting.
And also, the other reason why it has great potential is that vignerons or grape growers like to grow it.
Yeah.
It is a fantastic variety to grow. It is very strong viticulturally. It's quite good as a drought tolerant variety for a warming, drying climate. So we'll start to see it planted much more in the inner regions, the riverland areas and so forth, as well as cooler parts of Australia. If you, in Campania, when you taste wines from the variety, that region is quite a diversity in altitude. So you can try a wine from, say, Fiudi de San Gregorio, one of the great producers of Fiano. You can try something that's grown at about 200 metres above sea level. Yep. It's rich, it's unctuous, it's full. And you can try something that's grown about 700 metres above sea level, which is really fine, crystalline, almost Chablis-like in its structure. And so they're both compelling wines.
I've noticed that. Obviously, we've had a few Fianos now. Yeah.
Doing your part?
We've had a crack at them. I fell in love with it. Good. I first had it for breakfast in the Riverland after a big night. I think it was show 5 in a row. And rocked up. I think I got home at 3 in the morning, rocked up at 10 at the wine centre, and they said, "Oh, you need a Fiano for breakfast." And I'd never had one.
Right, okay.
So, the 6 wines afterward probably helped as well. But the thing was, I'd never had it, and I was like, wow. And then, I kind of forgot about it a little bit, and then I was at Richard Hamilton.
Okay.
And we're doing their amazing wines, and the Fiano was one of the wines we did, and they brought out the Centurion, the old Centurion, and when we were driving back, I said, I think I like the Fiano better than that. Nothing against their other wines, were awesome, but the Fiano just, and then I was like, right, we've got to get more into it, and obviously, having known you guys, I knew that you were the birthplace of it. So, what Fiano have you brought on for today?
So we've got our 2021, so fairly new into bottle. So yeah, brand new vintage.
How long's it been? Can you get it yet?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's now
Released
available
on Monday.
Yeah,
Monday?
really. Yeah.
Just for us, was it?
Yeah. Well, that's right.
Which is just as well because there was none of the other vintage, so we wouldn't do this show otherwise. I guess.
It would have been a pretty boring show without any wine. Well, we could have tried it from tank, I guess. But yeah, so
That would have been interesting.
I guess, yeah, you talked about that kind of immediate, your first experience tasting Fiano, and I think Fiano, it's quite distinctive and it's quite aromatic. There's a lot of intensity in the flavours and the aroma profile of this variety. So I think it does sort of immediately capture people. You know,
Yeah.
the first time they look at it, it's quite stands out in the glass. So that gives it a pretty good head start, I guess.
So this is my first 21 Fiano, and to me, and obviously you guys know I'm a bit of a novice, but very much of a green tint. Oh, that's because it's young, isn't it?
Yeah, but you do. I mean, there's a few things there. You've got a beautiful natural acidity, and often it has this almost sort of luminescence, I guess.
That's a much better way of describing it. I'm just storing that.
Green works, though.
No, luminescence is way better. No, so it's on the nose.
Grapefruit is
yeah.
a pretty common. So when we have this in the tank farm, when we ferment, when we're fermenting these parcels, you can walk past a tank of theirs and you can actually smell this almost ruby red grapefruit-like character. So it's a very common descriptor for
Grapefruit isn't it?
For Fiano.
And it's very, very, very strong on the nose, isn't it? Very
highly
fruit.
aromatic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I sort of get a lot of like lemongrass and preserved lemon and sort of then your pears and fresh pineapple, but it's always got that slightly honeyed character as well.
Yeah, depending on how early or not you pick the variety, it can also have a different suite of varieties.
right.
So if you pick it very early, it can be almost Sauvignon Blanc-like in its pungency and lift. And the further you allow it to ripen on the vine, you get more fruit-filled characters, more spice, nuttiness, honey, etc., etc. So that's also a journey that we've been on for the last 20 years, learning with this variety how and when you pick the variety can really determine the flavours.
Are we allowed to say that, or is it classified? When was the perfect time to pick it this year?
Well, we source now from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different separate Fiano blocks, sort of here and in another part of McLaren Vale. So they kind of ripen at different times, and we're looking for different attributes, I guess.
And you've worked the blocks out?
Yeah, so we've been
It takes a long time to work the blocks out.
And so what we're trying to achieve. So it's quite a diverse, I guess, like any wine, a lot of wines, it's not just pick the Fiano, ferment it, and it's done. There's sort of the different blocks, and we bring quite purposeful in the way we kind of bring them into the winery and how we treat them. So some of the blocks we keep them very clean and very aromatic and fresh. Part of this is fermented in barrel.
Yeah.
So we get a 20-25% barrel sort of fermentation.
What sort of barrels?
Sort of a used large format, but definitely we're not looking for any obvious oak characters. But I think it does help with some of that kind of almost like white pepper spice as well that you see.
With Fiano, quite like vinifying parcels separately, some goes into stainless steel, clean, very cool temperature controlled ferment, other in oak, ambient, wild, and starts off wild and then we inoculate. And that we have the combination of the two, the freshness and the brightness and the richness and the texture, and they come together beautifully.
Yeah. And then we're just blending it on the table, working it out. And who gets the final decision? Or is it
it's democratic, but I'm the one that sends it to bottle. So,
yeah, right. So it's democratic, but you do.
But no, it's about getting that just beautiful. I mean, I think already this is pretty young wine, but already just that beautiful seamless palate weight. It's sort of got a light creaminess to it, but it's
that threw me straight away. Was being a young wine, how creamy it is already.
Yeah, there's lovely richness, and Fiano is, as mentioned before, it's a very thick-skinned variety, and so inherently you get texture.
It sounds like there's a fair bit of effort that goes into it. It's not a set and forget, is it?
No, it's not a set and forget. There's a few little kind of winemaking tricks or quirks about Fiano. It's I think we sort of mentioned it can be slightly more prone to sort of stopping its fermentation. So it definitely needs to keep an eye on it.
I didn't expect it to be so creamy.
Yeah, I think it's important that we show off the fact that we are a Mediterranean climate here. So we have warm summers and we can produce wines with real richness and intensity rather than, fine, very highly acidic, pick too early varieties. Fiano, you can push the ripeness because you have all this beautiful natural acidity. And so you can push it to 13.5 Beaumet, but you've still got all your natural acidity sitting there beautifully holding everything in check. And so it allows us to create a wine that has some power and richness, which, did we bring the Rubato?
Yeah, I stuck one under the table.
What have you got?
I want to have a little look.
Well, this will demonstrate that fact a little further.
Right, eh?
So, this is 2 barrels of this produced, or maybe we did 3 in 2020, but this is our 2020 Rubato Fiano. So, Rubato is a musical term to express oneself freely.
So when our father's smashing the keys on this thing and he goes off on his own tangent a little, that's written into the piece of music. If it says Rubato, it basically means that you can interpret that. Even though the notes are written there, you can determine it how you like. So it gives you a little more artistic license, I guess. And so this is really something that we've been wanting to make for decades, and but we really needed to get the vineyards exactly how we wanted them, to create a wine that is the next step up in richness, power, intensity, weight, and really being unashamed of making a very rich, highly concentrated wine.
Yeah.
So this comes off our original planting, so a block planted just about 50 metres from the winery here, 2001. And this is part of that was all fermented in, we sort of did, I think I had about 4 or 5 hogsheads that year, so 300 litre barrels, and a couple of them went into the main blend, and then sort of selected the best 3.
Yep.
And to blend for this, reserve wine. So you'll see instantly on the nose, a lot more, sort of savouriness, but quite rich in that almost sort of honeycomb. And,
I can actually pick up a little bit of spice in it too.
Yeah, powdered ginger is quite a common, not that I ever use powdered ginger, I only use fresh, but the one time I smelt powdered ginger, it's this sort of descriptor.
And you'll see obviously a bit more colour. Glass. It is a year older, but it is also, even as a bottled wine, it would have had a bit more colour. But really it's on the palate, it's about unashamedly being a white wine of power and richness. But importantly, that acidity is still really clean and fresh through the whole palate.
Oh, it is worlds apart, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's it can handle some pretty rich flavoured foods. So it sounds a bit silly, but a great food pairing with this is like an Asian spiced pork belly. Very crispy, crackling. It can handle that fat and that richness of pork really well, which is quite rare for a white.
And spice. Fiano can handle spice extremely well. This is kind of how I got onto it, because we've got a heckler on the show, a mate of mine and Pete's. he just, no matter what you're having, he goes, does it go with a curry? Because he rates himself as a curry. Find me something that goes with a curry, something that's really spicy. And I've got a favourite Thai restaurant, just at Christie's Beach, and I asked them, and she said Fiano.
Yeah.
She said Fiano, and then she said, I'll just trick it up a little bit. A salad, if you know Thai.
Yeah.
A salad, you think it's going to be cooler, and it's always hotter. A nice papaya salad with the reserve, I think would be a perfect match.
Yeah, with some crispy pork belly.
Yeah. I did like the idea of that. You made me extremely hungry talking about that. I was waiting for you to bring it out, but
Sounds pretty good.
Yeah, it was kind of just like a little dream sequence always.
I mean, not like, that is still definitely not an aperitif. This is still a serious white wine that you need food to really appreciate at its best.
So obviously you got your spicy pork belly here. What are we having here?
Yeah, so it's like richer fish dishes. I had some lovely red mullet last week, which would work really well. So maybe not your whiting or super delicate fish, but a richer fish. Or
what about a crayfish? That's what we had last night.
No, I probably wouldn't. I would go something like, maybe red mullet, or just richer poultry. Quail would work really well.
It's pretty good with a classic roast chicken, to be honest.
Yeah.
Why not a pheasant, Duncan?
So I was going to ask the layman what you would have had with it, but you beat me to it.
But I have simple taste.
Right. So what are you pairing? I'm coming to lunch at your house. What are we pairing?
What are you going to cook, Duncan?
Yeah. Probably. I can go on
sausages,
takeaway.
steak.
Look, that I would probably, in my household, would be a slightly more classic Mediterranean, roast chook with roast tomatoes and sort of fried bread. thrown in the pan and tossed around. As always, works pretty well.
Do bakers like frying bread? They're really quality bread they make. Do they like it being?
Well, it's the stuff that's a day old that you haven't, you know, that's slightly. You want something that's slightly stale. Your sourdough that's, you know, the last of the third that's going to go stale. You cut into cubes, throw it in with all the fat and fry it, you know, bake it, fry it in the oven.
I was thinking maybe a.
Well, the question is, what were you thinking?
I was thinking maybe a spaghetti marinara.
Absolutely. Yeah.
With some nice mussels and yeah. Not that I could cook it, but my wife's an awesome cook. So if you wanted to bring the reserve round, I'm sure she could make something for you. But a quick question.
Yep.
Never had a reserve Fiano before. Awesome. Never had a 21 before either.
Yep.
Awesome. Price-wise, what do we?
28 and 50.
Right. 28. It's just put under your arm and run out the door for $28, isn't it? What's the best way for people to get Coriole's wines? Is it? I think come to the cellar door.
Yeah, come to the cellar door, absolutely.
Sea velvet.
Sea velvet.
Yeah.
There's always
Bun,
something
Joy,
interesting in cellar door that you can't get elsewhere, so it's worth taking.
Tours? Does Duncan ever take people on a tour?
Yeah, wander down to the winery and ask them to show you around.
Yeah, nothing official, but if you
Right.
bring something.
Socials? Socials?
Yeah.
I know your socials are right.
Yes, yeah, we have a fantastic social media manager who keeps us all in line.
Yeah, looking right at us, so keep talking.
Yeah, and obviously online, coriole.com. So that's, this has just been released on Monday, and like last year, will likely sell out. So
Awesome. Well, cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for
Thanks for coming by.